People like you shouldn't be crowding the entrances of buildings like this. Creates the wrong impression, don't you think? Makes the place look messy.
A cold morning. A luxury building. Two strangers. One vicious insult that echoed through the glass towers. She never imagined the man she dismissed outside would hold the key to her future, or that her words would ignite a revenge so precise it would unravel her world thread by thread. This isn't just a story about power. It's about the moment pride meets punishment. If this twist left you breathless, subscribe for more gripping tales of justice and hidden truths. One click fuels our next mystery. Where did you watch this? Drop your city below. The morning air held a crisp bite, sharp against the skin, carrying the distant hum of the awakening city. Marcus Johnson stood on the sidewalk, a tall, lean figure clad in a simple, well-tailored dark coat. He wasn't looking at the imposing glass tower that dominated the skyline ahead, the headquarters of Iridian Dynamics, a place humming with billions and influence. His gaze was fixed downward, fingers deftly navigating his phone screen, confirming details for the crucial board meeting mere hours away. He savored these quiet moments before the corporate storm, the anonymity of the street before the weight of the CO title settled upon his shoulders. The polished chrome revolving doors seemed distant, unimportant for now. Then, the sharp click of expensive heels shattered the fragile peace. A woman, blonde hair sculpted into a severe bun, face etched with a permanent scowl of dissatisfaction, stopped abruptly beside him. Her perfume, a cloying cloud of jasmine and artificial musk, invaded his space. She wore a power suit the color of blood, sharp enough to cut glass, and clutched a designer leather folio like a weapon. Her eyes, a cold, pale blue, raked over him, lingering on his face, his hands, dismissing him instantly. He hadn't moved, hadn't blocked her path. He was simply there. "Excuse you," she snapped, her voice like ice cracking. "Do you mind? Some of us have actual important places to be on time." Not loitering. Marcus slowly lifted his head, meeting her glare. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by deeper disdain as she took in his features fully. He offered a calm, neutral expression, the one he reserved for hostile takeover bids. "The sidewalk is public space," he stated, his voice low and steady. "I'm simply waiting." "Waiting?" She barked a short, humorless laugh. "Waiting for what?" "The bus." Her gaze swept over his coat again, finding no obvious corporate insignia, no gleaming ID badge clipped proudly to his lapel. "People like you shouldn't be crowding the entrances of buildings like this. Creates the wrong impression, don't you think? Makes the place look messy." She gestured vaguely towards the gleaming Viridian Tower, her implication hanging heavy and ugly in the air. Marcus felt a familiar, cold knot form in his stomach. Not anger, not yet. A weary recognition, a deep-seated ache. He remained silent, choosing stillness over engagement, hoping she would move on. His silence seemed to inflame her. She took a half-step closer, invading his personal space deliberately. "Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you just don't belong here, period. This isn't some community center handout line. This," she stabbed a manicured finger towards the building, "is real business. Lavish offices for serious professionals. People who earn their place." Her lip curled. "Frankly, it's disrespectful. Standing around here makes the executives uncomfortable seeing certain types lingering. Black people don't exactly fit the profile for these kinds of environments, do they? Probably better suited for manual labor, deliveries, something like that. Less visible." The words, casual in their cruelty, landed like physical blows. The cold knot ignited into a slow, burning fury. Marcus kept his face impassive, a mask of polished stone, but his eyes, dark and fathomless, locked onto hers. He saw the absolute certainty in her expression, the unshakable belief in her own superiority and his inherent unworthiness. She didn't see a man. She saw a stereotype, an inconvenience, a stain on her pristine corporate world. "Are you finished?" Marcus asked, his voice dangerously quiet, each word precisely measured. The controlled calm seemed to unnerve her slightly. Finished? I'm just stating facts, she retorted, puffing up her chest. This area needs to be kept clear for employees. People who contribute, not bystanders. She glanced impatiently at the slim platinum watch on her wrist. Honestly, the security here is getting lax. Letting anyone just hang about. Probably looking for handouts or casing the joint. She gave him another dismissive once-over. You should move along. Find somewhere else to exist. Somewhere more appropriate. A muscle twitched near Marcus's jaw. The sheer, unchecked arrogance was breathtaking. He took a slow, deliberate breath, the icy air filling his lungs. The fury was a white-hot core now, but he contained it, channeling it into a terrifying focus. He saw her name badge now, clipped to the lapel of her blood-red jacket, partially obscured by her folio. Rebecca Thorne, marketing associate, Viridian Dynamics. A low-level associate. His employee. The irony was savage, almost poetic. Instead of reacting, instead of unleashing the storm brewing within him, Marcus did something unexpected. He offered a small, tight smile that didn't touch his eyes. It was a chilling expression, devoid of warmth. Viridian Dynamics, he stated, his gaze fixed on her badge, then lifting to her bewildered face. Impressive company. Rebecca blinked, thrown off by the calm acknowledgement. Of course it is, she sniffed, mistaking his comment for awe. One of the top firms in the city, which is precisely why standards need to be maintained. At the entrance and within. Her emphasis on within was another pointed barb. Standards. Marcus echoed softly, the word tasting like ash. He looked past her, towards the revolving doors. I imagine they value punctuality highly. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of unease finally breaking through her arrogance. What's that supposed to mean? Are you threatening me? She glanced nervously towards the building entrance, perhaps expecting security she could summon. No threat, Marcus said, his voice smooth as polished obsidian. He took a step towards the entrance, forcing her to step back or be shoulder-side. Merely an observation. And since you're so concerned about being on time, he paused, meeting her confused gaze directly. Shall we? He gestured towards the revolving doors. Rebecca stared at him, utterly flummoxed. We? What are you talking about? I'm not going anywhere with you. Security. Her voice rose, sharp and shrill, attracting glances from a few passers-by hurrying towards the building. But Marcus didn't stop. He moved with a quiet, unstoppable purpose towards the gleaming chrome doors. The morning sun caught the glass, momentarily blinding. Rebecca, caught between outrage and bewilderment, hesitated. Her precious punctuality warred with her disgust. Seeing him actually approach the sacred entrance of Viridian Dynamics, the place she clearly felt was her exclusive domain, seemed to short-circuit her thinking. With a huff of indignation, propelled by a mix of fury and the need to ensure this intruder was dealt with, she stalked after him, her heels striking the pavement like gunshots. Unbelievable, she hissed, catching up just as he reached the doors. You have no business going in there. I'll have security escort you out immediately. They know me. Marcus didn't look at her. He simply pushed against the cool glass of the revolving door compartment. We'll see, he murmured, the words barely audible over the software of the mechanism. Rebecca scrambled into the next compartment, her face flushed with anger and exertion. They revolved slowly, the outside world blurring, replaced by the sterile, opulent lobby of Viridian Dynamics. The soaring atrium, the gleaming marble floor, the sleek reception desk manned by impeccably dressed staff. The air inside was hushed, smelling faintly of lemon polish and expensive coffee. Rebecca burst out of her compartment first, already scanning for security, her finger raised to point accusingly at Marcus as he emerged calmly behind her. Security. This man, she began, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. He was harassing me outside. He doesn't belong here. He was loitering, making racist remarks, and then he just forced his way in. Her words tumbled out, shrill and desperate. But before she could locate a guard, before the receptionist even fully registered her outburst, the atmosphere in the lobby shifted palpably. It was subtle at first, a sudden stillness from the reception desk, a cessation of low chatter. Heads turned not towards Rebecca, but towards Marcus. Eyes widened. Postures snapped straight. Marcus ignored Rebecca completely. He walked forward, not toward the elevator she instinctively headed for, but towards the grand, sweeping staircase that led directly to the executive suites, a staircase rarely used by anyone below the VP level. His stride was confident, unhurried, radiating an authority that seemed to settle over the lobby like a physical weight. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat. Rebecca, momentarily stunned by his audacity and the sudden quiet, faltered. "Hey, you! Stop! Where do you think you're going?" she shrieked, starting after him. "That's the executive wing. You can't just—" He pulled out a slim, matte black keycard unlike any employee badge. It was unadorned, save for a single, small, embossed silver V. He didn't swipe it at the discreet reader beside the staircase. He merely held it loosely in his hand as he ascended the first few steps. The effect was instantaneous. The head receptionist, a woman Rebecca knew only as the formidable Ms. Chun, who tolerated no nonsense, stood up abruptly from her desk. Her face, usually professionally composed, was pale. She wasn't looking at Rebecca. Her horrified gaze was fixed entirely on Marcus. Then, she did something Rebecca had never witnessed in her 3 years of Viridian. She bowed her head, just slightly, a gesture of profound deference. "Mr. Johnson," Ms. Chun breathed, the name carrying through the silent lobby with shocking clarity. "Good morning, sir. We weren't expecting you through the main entrance." Her voice trembled slightly. Rebecca Thorne froze mid-step, her hand still raised in accusation, her mouth hanging open. The blood drained from her face so rapidly she felt lightheaded. "Johnson?" Her brain scrambled, tried to process the impossible. Viridian Dynamics. The CEO, the famously private, brilliant, and notoriously demanding leader who had transformed the company from the top down in just 5 years. Marcus Johnson, the name she'd seen on company-wide memos, the signature on her bonus letter last year. A name she'd vaguely associated with power, certainly not with him, not with the man she just told didn't deserve to stand outside his own building. Marcus paused on the 3rd step. He finally turned, slowly, deliberately. His gaze swept over the frozen tableau, the stunned receptionists, the few early employees rooted to the spot near the elevators, and finally, landing on Rebecca Thorne. Her face was a mask of dawning, abject terror. The color had vanished completely, leaving her chalk white. Her expensive folio slipped from her numb fingers, hitting the marble floor with a sharp, echoing slap that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. There was no anger visible now, only a chilling calm, an unnerving stillness. The white-hot fury he controlled outside was buried deep, replaced by something far colder, far more dangerous. He held her gaze, those dark eyes seeming to strip her bare, exposing every vile word she'd uttered just minutes before. He didn't need to speak. The weight of his position, the crushing reality of who he was, and the absolute horror of who she had been to him, hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The lavish lobby, the symbol of everything she coveted and felt entitled to, suddenly felt like a cage. Her career, her carefully constructed world, teetered on the edge of an abyss she had dug herself. His silence was the first devastating blow of his revenge. The sweet, chilling game had just begun. The slap of Rebecca's folio hitting the marble echoed long after the sound itself faded. It hung in the stunned silence of the Viridian Dynamics lobby like a physical presence, a punctuation mark to her catastrophic misstep. Her hand remained frozen mid-air, the accusatory finger now trembling violently. Her blood-red suit seemed garish under the atrium's cool, recessed lighting, a stark contrast to the pallor of her face, which had turned the color of sour milk. Her lungs refused to draw breath. Mr. Johnson, the CEO. The man whose name inspired a unique blend of respect and fear throughout the entire industry. The man she had just accused of loitering, of not belonging, of being less than. Marcus Johnson didn't move from his position on the staircase. He simply stood there, 3 steps above the polished floor, surveying the scene he commanded with an unnerving stillness. His gaze, dark and unreadable, finally drifted from the mortified receptionist to settle fully on Rebecca. It wasn't anger she saw. It was something far more chilling, absolute icy calm. A predator assessing prey that had stumbled blindly into its den. He didn't need to raise his voice, didn't need to gesture. His mere presence, his silent acknowledgement of her existence after her tirade, was condemnation enough. Rebecca felt the floor tilt beneath her expensive heels. The opulent lobby, a symbol of the power and prestige she desperately craved, now felt like a vast, cold tomb. The air conditioning, usually a gentle hum, now felt like an arctic wind biting into her skin. She saw her reflection distorted in the gleaming chrome banister, a small, ridiculous figure drowning in a sea of marble and glass. Her carefully constructed world, built on brittle arrogance and assumed superiority, had shattered in the span of 30 seconds. The echo of her own words, "Black people don't deserve. Find somewhere else to exist," screamed inside her skull, amplified 1,000 times by the crushing weight of who she'd said them to. Ms. Chun, the head receptionist, recovered first, her professional mask slamming back into place, though a flicker of horrified sympathy for Rebecca was quickly buried. "Mr. Johnson," she repeated, her voice steadier now, laced with deference. "Your 915 is waiting in the Skyview conference room. Would you like me to?" Her eyes darted briefly, nervously, towards the petrified figure of Rebecca, then snapped back to the CEO. Marcus finally moved. He didn't answer Ms. Chun. He didn't look away from Rebecca. He descended the 3 steps, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Each footfall on the marble was unervingly precise. He walked past her, close enough for her to catch the faint, clean scent of his soap, a stark contrast to her own cloying perfume. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak to her. He simply walked towards the bank of executive elevators to the left of the grand staircase, the ones Rebecca Thorne, marketing associate, had never been permitted to use. The utter dismissal was more devastating than any shout. He walked past her as if she were invisible, as if she were nothing. The man she had deemed unworthy of standing on the sidewalk was now walking away from her towards the pinnacle of power within the very building she claimed he had no right to enter. The humiliation was a physical burn, searing her from the inside out. Only when the polished steel elevator doors slid silently shut behind him did the lobby seem to exhale. The frozen tableau broke. Receptionists exchanged wide-eyed, whispered glances. An employee who had been waiting near the regular elevators quickly looked away, pretending intense interest in his phone. The low hum of activity tentatively resumed, but the air remained thick with the aftermath of the seismic event that had just occurred. Rebecca remained rooted to the spot. Her folio lay sprawled on the floor, spilling glossy marketing materials like guts on the marble. She couldn't bend down to retrieve it. Her legs felt like water. Her mind was a chaotic whirlwind of terror. Fired. Ruined. Disgraced. The words pounded against her temples. She imagined security descending on her any second, escorting her out in front of everyone. She pictured the email blast to the entire company, detailing her offense. She saw her LinkedIn profile, meticulously crafted, turning into a digital tombstone. But no security came. No one approached her. Ms. Chun was back at her desk, typing with fierce concentration, pointedly avoiding looking in Rebecca's direction. The other receptionists followed suit. It was the silence, the deliberate ignoring, that was the most terrifying. It felt like being trapped in a nightmare where everyone could see her screaming, but no one reacted. With a jerky, uncoordinated movement, Rebecca finally stooped, her fingers fumbling clumsily to gather the spilled papers. Her hand shook so badly she dropped them twice. She shoved the disordered mess back into the folio, her cheeks burning. Avoiding all eye contact, she stumbled towards the regular elevators, the ones that led to the marketing department on the 17th floor. The walk felt endless. Every step echoed her shame. She could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching her retreat, hear the phantom whispers swirling around her. The elevator ride was a suffocating box of mirrored walls reflecting her terrified, pale face back at her. The 17th floor was its usual hive of pre-meeting activity, the clatter of keyboards, the low murmur of conversations, the smell of coffee. But as Rebecca stepped out of the elevator, a subtle shift occurred. Heads didn't exactly turn, but conversations seemed to dip in volume for a fraction of a second. Eyes glanced her way, then quickly darted away. A colleague she usually exchanged pleasantries with suddenly found something fascinating on his monitor screen. The air crackled with unspoken knowledge. News traveled fast in Viridian Towers. Rebecca kept her head down, practically ran to her cubicle, a small, partitioned space suddenly feeling like both a prison and a pathetic refuge. She slammed the folio down on her desk, collapsing into her chair. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. What now? Was he waiting? Would her manager, Susan Davies, storm over any moment, face grim, holding a termination letter? Would HR call her in? The uncertainty was torture. Every ping of an email notification made her jump. Every footstep approaching her cubicle sent a jolt of panic through her. Minutes bled into an hour. Nothing happened. The office routine flowed around her cubicle like water around a rock. People talked, laughed, went to meetings. She was simply ignored, more thoroughly than ever before. It was as if her cubicle had become quarantined. The phone on her desk remained silent. No emails demanding her presence. The normal buzz of work requests vanished. It was a void, a terrifying limbo. This wasn't just punishment. It was psychological warfare. He was letting her stew, letting the terror build, letting her imagine the worst possible scenarios. The lavish office she'd boasted about owning the right to inhabit had become her personal purgatory. She tried to focus on her screen, pulling up a spreadsheet. The numbers blurred. Her mind kept replaying the scene downstairs. The cold contempt in his eyes, the absolute silence of his judgment, the way he'd walked past her as if she were dust. The memory of her own vile words echoed, each one a fresh stab of self-loathing mixed with bone-deep fear. Why hadn't he just fired her immediately? What cruel game was he playing? At 10:15 a.m., an email notification finally popped up. It wasn't from HR or her manager. The sender name made her blood run cold. Marcus Johnson, CEO. The subject line was chillingly simple. Asterisk board materials, Skyview conference room. Asterisk her breath hitched. Was this it? A summons to her execution? With trembling fingers, she opened the email. It was brief, impersonal, addressed to a distribution list that included every department head and their senior assistants. It contained a link to the secure server folder for the upcoming board meeting materials. Standard procedure. Except, her name wasn't on the distribution list. Marketing associates didn't receive board materials. Why had she gotten this? Then she saw it. At the very bottom of the email, below the standard signature block, was a single line typed in the same calm font as the rest of the message. Rebecca Thorne, please ensure the marketing department's Q3 projections are formatted according to the board template, v.4.1, and uploaded to the folder by 11 a.m. Accuracy is paramount. Asterisk, it was a mundane task. A task far below her perceived station, usually delegated to interns. But the timing, the specificity, the sender. It was a deliberate act, a calculated humiliation. He knew she'd receive the email meant for executives. He knew she'd see it. He was assigning her grunt work, reminding her precisely where she stood in his lavish corporate office. And the words, asterisk accuracy is paramount asterisk, felt like a veiled threat, a reminder that her every move was now under his microscope. It wasn't a firing. It was a leash, a collar. He wasn't done with her. The revenge wasn't swift. It was slow, methodical, and deeply, deeply personal. The terror curdled into a sickening dread. This was just the beginning. The CEO hadn't dismissed her from the building. He'd trapped her inside it, under his direct, terrifying control. The sweet revenge had entered its second, agonizing phase. The lavish office walls seemed to close in, whispering promises of ruin far more intricate and painful than mere termination. Her punishment was just starting to unfold, minute by excruciating minute. The CEO's email burned on Rebecca's screen. 11:00 a.m. The digits pulsed like a countdown timer strapped to her heart. Accuracy is paramount. The words weren't just an instruction. They were a blade held to her throat. A single misplaced decimal, a formatting error in the Q3 projections. Could that be the excuse he needed? The final, public push into the abyss? Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up her spine. She lunged for the share drive, fingers slipping on the mouse. The board template, v.4.1. Where was it? Her usual arrogance, the shield she wore like armor, was gone, replaced by a raw, trembling vulnerability. She felt exposed, scrutinized, not just by Marcus Johnson, but by the very air in the office. The low hum of conversation outside her cubicle sounded like whispered judgments. Every glance from a passing colleague felt like a dagger. She found the template, an intricate labyrinth of locked cells and conditional formatting. It was complex, designed for senior analysts, not associates. Sweat prickled her scalp under the severe bun. Time bled away. 10:30 a.m. She copied the raw data from the department's master file, her eyes scanning frantically, terrified of transferring a wrong figure. Her hand shook, making the cursor jump. Black people don't deserve. The memory of her own voice, loud and ugly on the sidewalk, echoed, drowning out the office sounds. How could she have been so blind? So monstrous? 10:45 a.m. She wrestled the numbers into the unforgiving template. A warning flag popped up. A sum didn't match a linked cell. Her breath hitched. Was it her error? Or the source data? Paranoia tightened its grip. Was this a trap? Had someone planted an inconsistency? She recalculated, triple-checked, her vision blurring. The pristine corporate world she'd weaponized against him was now a minefield laid specifically for her. 10:55 a.m. With trembling fingers, she saved the document, named it exactly as specified, and dragged it into the secure board folder. The upload progress bar crawled with agonizing slowness. 10:58, 10:59. Upload complete. She slumped back in her chair, a wave of nauseous relief washing over her, immediately followed by deeper dread. It was done. But what now? His silence was worse than any reprimand. The reprieve was brief. At 11:15 a.m., her desk phone rang, a shrill sound that made her flinch violently. The caller ID displayed. Internal, executive suite. Her blood turned to ice. She fumbled the receiver, nearly dropping it. In marketing, Rebecca Thorne speaking. She stammered, her voice thin and tight. Ms. Thorne. The voice on the other end was cool, professional, devoid of any inflection. A woman's voice she didn't recognize. Mr. Johnson requires your presence in the Skyview conference room. Immediately. Skyview? Now. But Rebecca's mind raced. The board meeting. Wasn't it still happening? Was he summoning her in front of the board? To humiliate her utterly? What is this regarding? Immediately, Ms. Thorne. The line went dead. No explanation. No mercy. The walk to the executive elevators was a death march. The regular elevator bank felt too exposed. Every step through the open plan office felt like walking a gauntlet. She kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, but she felt the stares, the sudden dips in conversation as she passed. Whispers seemed to coil around her like smoke. Her manager, Susan Davies, emerged from her glass-walled office just as Rebecca neared the elevators. Susan's face, usually brisk and focused, was unreadable. Her eyes met Rebecca's for a fleeting, electric second, a look not of anger, but of profound disappointment and a chilling distance. Susan didn't speak. She simply turned and walked back in her office, shutting the door firmly. The message was clear. Rebecca was on her own, utterly alone. The executive elevator was silent and swift, paneled in dark wood. The only sound was the frantic pounding of her own heart. The doors slid open directly onto the hushed, carpeted corridor leading to the Skyview conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, dizzying view of the city, but Rebecca saw none of it. Her gaze was locked on the imposing double doors ahead. Were they still in session? Would she have to knock? Would a security guard open it? Before she could decide, one door opened silently. Not a security guard, but Marcus Johnson's personal assistant, a man known only as Elias. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with eyes as sharp and assessing as flint. He gave her a brief, impersonal nod. "This way, Miss Thorne." He didn't lead her into the main conference room. Instead, he gestured toward a small, dimly lit antechamber to the side. Relief warred with confusion. Not the boardroom. But why? She stepped inside. It was a plush waiting area, deep leather chairs, a low table with expensive-looking art books. And, standing by the window, his back to her, looking out at the panoramic cityscape, was Marcus Johnson. Elias closed the door softly behind her, sealing her in with the CEO. The silence in the small room was absolute, thick with tension. Marcus didn't turn. He stood perfectly still, a silhouette against the vast skyline. The power radiating from him was almost physical, pressing down on her. Rebecca stood frozen just inside the door, clutching her hands together to stop their trembling. The scent of his soap, clean and subtle, filled the small space, a stark, terrifying reminder of his proximity. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The only sound was her own shallow, rapid breathing. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. The memory of her sneering words, "People like you shouldn't be crowding the entrances," echoed deafeningly in the silence. Here he stood, the absolute ruler of this domain, while she, the one who declared who did and didn't belong, was reduced to a trembling supplicant in a side room. Finally, he moved, not a large movement, just a slight turn of his head, enough to profile his face against the window light. He still didn't look at her directly. His voice, when it came, was low, calm, and utterly devoid of emotion. It wasn't loud, yet it filled every corner of the room. The projections. A statement, not a question. Rebecca jumped. "Why, yes, Mr. Johnson. Uploaded. By 11. I follow the template. Version 4.1. Her voice sounded thin and pathetic to her own ears. He was silent again for a long moment. Then, "Accuracy is the foundation of trust in business, Miss Thorne. Wouldn't you agree?" The question hung in the air, loaded with terrible meaning. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about her, her character, her vile, inaccurate assumptions about him, about who deserved to be where. Her lack of trustworthiness, laid bare by her own words. Her mouth was dry as sandpaper. "Yes, sir," she whispered. He finally turned fully, slowly, deliberately. His dark eyes met hers. There was no fury there, no visible satisfaction. Only a deep, unnerving stillness, like the calm eye of a hurricane. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the lobby. It wasn't a look of hatred. It was a look of cold, clinical assessment, as if she were a flawed specimen under a microscope. The sheer lack of heat in his gaze was more terrifying than any rage. "You made assumptions this morning, Ms. Thorne," he stated, his tone conversational, almost detached. "Assumptions about my place, about your own, about who belongs in lavish corporate offices." He didn't quote her directly, but the words hung between them, more potent for his restraint. "Assumptions," he continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming even softer, yet somehow sharper, "are dangerous. They lead to inaccuracies, significant ones." Rebecca felt tears pricking at her eyes, hot and humiliating. She blinked furiously, staring at the expensive carpet. I deeply apologize, Mr. Johnson. It was unforgivable." The words felt utterly inadequate, dust in the face of her crime. Unforgivable, he echoed softly. He took a single step towards her, not threateningly, but the movement made her flinch back instinctively, bumping against the closed door. He stopped. A ghost of something, not a smile, but a fleeting, chilling acknowledgement of her fear, touched his lips and vanished. Apologies are also a form of data, Ms. Thorne. They require verification, consistency, proof of changed understanding. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Her apology meant nothing. It was just another statement to be scrutinized, tested for accuracy. He wasn't accepting it. He wasn't dismissing her. He was evaluating her under ongoing, unbearable observation. Viridian dynamics, he said, his gaze never leaving her face, is built on precision, on merit, on the accurate assessment of value. He paused again, the silence screaming louder than any accusation. Your value to this company, Ms. Thorne, requires reevaluation. A thorough audit, if you will. He didn't say she was fired. He didn't say she was suspended. He spoke of an audit. A cold, procedural word that promised a drawn-out, excruciating examination of her every flaw, her every past mistake, her very right to exist within these walls she'd claimed as her exclusive territory. The revenge wasn't explosive, it was bureaucratic. It was a slow, administrative suffocation. Return to your desk, he instructed, his tone shifting back to detached command. Elias will send you details regarding the review process. Cooperate fully. Transparency is key. He turned back towards the window, dismissing her as completely as if she'd vanished. The conversation, if it could be called that, was over. Rebecca stood there for a second, trembling, the dismissal hitting her like a physical blow. He had reduced her entire career, her future, to a cold corporate procedure. An audit. The word echoed in the hollow space he'd left inside her. Elias opened the door silently, his expression impassive. Stumbling out, the bright light of the executive corridor felt blinding, hostile. The walk back to the elevator, under Elias's watchful, silent escort, was the longest of her life. The lavish corporate office, once the symbol of her ambition, had become the stage for her prolonged, meticulously planned professional execution. The sweet revenge was a slow, chilling drip of institutional ice, freezing her from the inside out. The audit had just been announced. The real terror was only beginning. The audit was a slow, cold drowning. It wasn't conducted by human resources, the usual arbiters of corporate justice. Instead, it was masterminded by Elias, the CEO's personal assistant, whose very presence outside Rebecca's cubicle felt like a silent judgment. He delivered the instructions with the detached precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. Ms. Thorne, he'd state, appearing without warning, his voice devoid of inflection. Mr. Johnson requires a comprehensive cross-referencing of all marketing campaign expenditures against final ROI metrics for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. Utilize the master financial database. Highlight any discrepancies exceeding 0.5%. Report structure follows template -7 Australian dollars. Deadline, end of business today. The tasks were monstrous. Not just difficult, but deliberately isolating and menial. They involved combing through years of dense financial data, cross-referencing obscure project codes, reconciling figures buried deep in labyrinthine spreadsheets, work usually handled by entire accounting teams or specialized software. Templates like -7 Australian dollars didn't exist publicly. Elias seemed to generate them on the spot, intricate documents designed to consume hours and expose the tiniest potential for error. Accuracy is paramount. The phantom words hissed in her ear with every keystroke. Rebecca became a ghost haunting her own cubicle. The vibrant buzz of the marketing department flowed around her, a river from which she was utterly excluded. Colleagues averted their eyes. Conversations died as she approached the printer. Invitations to lunch ceased. Susan Davies, her manager, communicated only via terse emails, offering no guidance, no protection. Rebecca was radioactive. The story of the sidewalk and the lobby had metastasized through the building, whispered in break rooms and elevator banks. She was the woman who told the CEO he didn't belong. Her fate was a grim spectacle, a warning etched in her isolation. She worked through lunch, fueled by terror and stale coffee. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen, her fingers cramped. Every discrepancy she found, a misplaced decimal, a campaign code misapplied, a rounding error, felt like a potential trap laid by Marcus Johnson himself. Was this minor mistake the one he'd used to justify her destruction? Paranoia became her constant companion. She triple-checked everything, her movements jerky with exhaustion and fear. The lavish office, with its ergonomic chairs and panoramic views, had become her personal torture chamber, brightly lit and suffocating. Days bled into a week. The tasks grew more arcane, the deadlines tighter. Elias appeared like a specter, delivering new, impossible demands. Compile a historical analysis of competitor response times to our Q1 product launches, sourced solely from publicly available SEC filings and press releases, 2019 to present. Utilize analytical framework outlined din memo au uns presece. The memos were dense, technical, requiring skills she didn't possess. Failure wasn't an option she could contemplate. Failure meant facing him again. Failure meant the abyss. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. Elias delivered his latest decree, a forensic reconstruction of a failed regional campaign from 2 years prior, requiring data Rebecca knew had been purged during a system migration. The raw server logs are archived, Elias stated impassively. Access requires level 9 clearance. Your temporary credentials are attached. The deadline was 9 a.m. the next day. Level 9 clearance was reserved for C-suite executives and senior IT security. Granting it to her, even temporarily, was absurd. It was a gauntlet thrown down. Accessing those logs meant navigating a digital fortress, knowing any misstep, an accidental click, an attempt to access unrelated data, would be instantly flagged, monitored, and likely construed as misconduct. It was less a task and more trial by fire, designed to break her. She worked through the night. The deserted office was a tomb, the silence broken only by the frantic clatter of her keyboard and the hum of the servers in the distant core. The archived logs were a tangled mess of code and timestamps, indecipherable without specialized tools she didn't have. Panic clawed at her throat. Every error message felt like an accusation. She imagined Marcus Johnson watching remotely, observing her flail in the digital dark. Was this his final move? To have her fired for incompetence and potential security violation? Somehow, bleary-eyed and trembling, she cobbled together a report by 8:55 a.m. It was a patchwork of incomplete data and desperate assumptions, far from the forensic precision demanded. She uploaded it, a sick feeling churning in her stomach. It was inaccurate. It was inadequate. It was failure. At 9:15 a.m., the summons came. Not via email or Elias. Her desk phone rang. The display simply said, Johnson, M. Her hand shook so violently she knocked over a coffee mug. Brown liquid spread across her desk, soaking papers, pooling around her keyboard. A pathetic, messy counterpoint to the sterile terror engulfing her. She let it ring 3 times before she could force herself to pick up. Ms. Thorne. His voice was the same calm, chilling baritone. The conference room adjacent to my office. Now. The line went dead. She didn't clean the spill. She stood up, ignoring the sticky mess, the ruined documents. Her reflection in a dark monitor screen showed a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, her severe bun fraying. The walk to the executive floor felt like ascending a scaffold. Elias met her at the elevator, his expression unreadable. He led her not to the grand Skyview room, but to a smaller, windowless chamber next to the CEO's suite. It contained a simple table, 2 chairs, and a large monitor on the wall. Marcus Johnson sat in one chair. He gestured to the other. Seat. She sat, perched on the edge, unable to meet his eyes. The air hummed with tension. He didn't speak immediately. He tapped a key on a small remote. The monitor flickered to life. Displayed on the screen was a security camera feed. The timestamp read 8:02 a.m. that morning. The location, the main lobby. The angle showed the revolving doors and the sidewalk beyond. Rebecca watched her own grainy image from hours earlier, scurrying into the building, head down, shoulders hunched against the world. She looked small, insignificant, afraid. Marcus tapped another key. The image froze. Then it split. The other half of the screen showed a different timestamp, 7:58 a.m., 2 days after the sidewalk incident. This feed showed the executive parking garage entrance. A sleek, black car glided to a stop. Marcus Johnson emerged, dressed impeccably, radiating calm authority. He nodded to the security guard, who snapped to attention, opening the private elevator access with a deferential bow. He didn't need to say a word. The contrast on the screen was devastating. There she was, this self-appointed gatekeeper of corporate belonging, reduced to a cowering figure sneaking in the front door. And there he was, the man she'd deemed unworthy, entering his domain through the exclusive, guarded entrance reserved for the true power within. The lavish office belonged utterly, unquestionably, to him. Her claims to it were exposed as the hollow, hateful boasts they were. He turned off the monitor. The room plunged into a silence more profound than before. He finally looked directly at her, his gaze like ice water. "You spoke of who deserves to be here," he said, his voice low, each word a hammer blow in the quiet room. "You spoke of visibility, of appropriateness." He leaned forward slightly, the movement minimal but charged with intensity. "Your audit, Ms. Thorne, is complete. The findings are unequivocal." He paused, letting the weight of his words crush her. Rebecca couldn't breathe. She stared at the blank screen, seeing only the damning images burned onto her retinas. "The inaccuracies in your assumptions," he continued, his tone chillingly matter-of-fact, "were fundamental, systemic. Your value proposition to Viridian Dynamics, based on the evidence of your conduct and the output of your assigned review tasks, is..." He searched for the precise corporate term, finding it with cold finality. "Negative. Your presence in this environment is incompatible with the company's core values of respect and merit-based achievement." He didn't say you're fired. He didn't need to. The language was colder, more absolute. A clinical termination of her existence within his world. "Elias will escort you to collect your personal belongings," Marcus stated, rising from his chair. He looked down at her, not with triumph, but with the cold finality of a judge delivering a sentence. "Security will be present to deactivate your access. Your formal termination notice will outline the severance package, contingent on your signing a standard non-disclosure agreement." He walked toward the door, stopping briefly. He didn't turn back. "The lavish corporate office, Ms. Thorne," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet echoing in the small room, "belongs to those who earn the right to be here. Through competence, through integrity." He paused, the unspoken condemnation hanging heavy. "Not through misplaced entitlement and hate." He opened the door and left without another glance. Elias stood framed in the doorway, a silent, implacable sentinel. Rebecca sat motionless in the sterile room, the echo of his final words ringing in her ears. The revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was the silent, crushing weight of truth and consequence. He hadn't just fired her. He had dismantled her. He had exposed her ugliness, stripped her of her false superiority, and cast her out of the kingdom she had falsely claimed to own. The sweetest revenge was the absolute, undeniable proof of her own irrelevance in the very world she had tried to bar him from. Elias cleared his throat softly. It was time to leave the lavish office forever. The silence that followed Marcus Johnson's exit was the loudest sound she had ever heard. It was the sound of her world ending, not with a bang, but with the soft, final click of a door closing on a future that had never truly been hers.